Hello and welcome to the third episode of the 3D Train Studio English tutorials. Today we're going to be covering a lot of things. We're going to start with a blank template, a blank plate, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at a little bit of the information about this plate first. We're going to edit the plate, or at least look at the information. The default settings for this are length 300 and width 150. We'll set the grid to 1 centimeter. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at some camera views. The first one is the 3D camera view, which shows the work area and the plate in 3 dimensions. Right next to that is the 2D camera view. That shows the work area in 2 dimensions. It's minus the Z dimension. And then next to that there's a little square grid called the technical drawing view. And we'll go ahead and pull that up. And the 2D technical drawing view, if we zoom in a little bit on this, you will see that it is actually a grid. We'll zoom in a little bit more, and if we go over, scroll over and down to the bottom left corner, you'll note that the scales, the measuring scales on the side and top are lined up at 0 and 0. If we go to the 2D camera view, you'll note that it moved the same as the technical drawing view. The 2 cameras are linked, so if you move in one, it's going to show up in the other one just exactly the same. The 3D camera view, however, does not move with the 2D and the technical drawing view, and so we'll go ahead now, and we're going to edit the plate, and we're going to change the dimensions on this to 400 by 400, and we'll change the grid size to 1 centimeter, and click OK on that, and it changes the dimensions of the bottom plate. Now if we go back to the 3D view, the technical drawing view, you'll note that the edges no longer line up at 0 and 0. And that's because we changed the settings of the plate. If we go ahead and go down under the properties to the 3D tool, right here, the 3-dimension tool, we can change the size of the position of this, and since it's 4,000 by 4,000 millimeters, we take half of that, or 2,000. And also 2,000 for the Y view. And when we do that, then the plate, we have to scroll up now. And when we do that, you'll note that the plate again is lined up at 0 and 0. So if you use a larger plate, you'll need to adjust that. Now the second thing we're going to do is we're going to add an additional plate or an additional panel, and they're located under Scenery. And under Panels, the first box. And there are several panels here. We're going to take the L form, the left one, and move that up onto the board. And then we'll go ahead and edit that. Now, the L form has 1A and 1B, which are the total length and the total width of it, and then we have one B or 2B and 2A, and those are the dimensions of the little piece that sticks out on that. Now we want this panel to match the width and the length of the original panel, the square panel. So we'll go 550, because the small piece is 150. And we'll do the same thing on the other dimension, the width, 550. Change the grid size to 1 centimeter and click OK. And now you'll note the width of the main piece is about the same as the square panel. So we'll go ahead now and we'll go over and we'll move this up and over so that the edges are lined up exactly with the square panel. And then we'll go ahead and we'll go up and line them up as close as possible. You can zoom in on the edge where the two panels join, and we'll see that it's not quite lined up, but pretty close. We'll go ahead and we'll try to adjust that a little bit. We need to zoom out to see the gizmo. And we'll go ahead and we'll move that up a little bit, too far, back down, close enough I think. So we'll go ahead and we'll leave that as is. Now I will be going in a minute and changing the color of one of the panels in the technical view, but we'll go ahead and we'll leave that as is for now. Now we're going to go ahead and link the L form panel to the square panel. And the reason for that is that when you move the square panel, the base plate, the L form moves with it. Linking is useful for a lot of different things that you want one piece to move with the other piece, but it's not a good idea to do a reciprocal linking, which is when you link one object to another and then take the second object and link it back to the first. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put a couple of pieces on the board. Steam locomotives. There's the first one. We'll stick that on the board. And then we'll go ahead and we'll stick another one on the board. And then we'll kind of zoom in on them so we can see them and scroll over. And when we do that, you should be able to see both locomotives. We'll take this second locomotive and we'll link it to the first locomotive. There's the first one. So we'll go ahead and we'll link that to the first one. And then we'll go ahead and we will select the first locomotive. And you'll see when we move the first one, the second one moves. We'll take that first locomotive now, and we're going to go over and we're going to link that to the second locomotive. The second's already linked to the first. So we'll go ahead and we'll link the first locomotive to the second locomotive, and when we do so, you'll note that the position for the locomotive starts to move a little bit. Not a whole lot, but because it's a big plate. But we'll go over and we'll move the second locomotive a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and we'll go over and we'll move the first locomotive a little bit. We're going to move that down just a little bit, and when we do so, it's going to catch, and there they go. And so they take off, and we'll probably never see them again. They're lost somewhere out in pretty much Never Never Land. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pause the animation for a bit. And you'll note that the numbers are still changing. We'll go ahead and we'll select. We'll pick one of the locomotives, the second one, and click OK. And then we'll go ahead and we'll delete that locomotive. And when we do, the thing goes back to default. We'll pick the first one again, click on that. And we'll go ahead, OK, and then we'll delete that one as well. So we've gotten rid of those two objects that are lost in Neverland. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to tracks now. We're going to go over to PICO, pick a straight track in the code 100 track, which is the standard size for HO. We'll pick a piece and we'll take it up and stick it on there. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to zoom in. Actually, it looks like we're going to the technical drawing view. We want to find that piece. And we're going to click on it, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to change the rotation on Z to 90, like so. Now we'll go back to the 3D view, and we'll zoom in, and we'll try to find the very edge of the bottom plate. Scroll down. And we're placing that pretty much right at the edge of the square bottom plate. Then we'll go to the technical view, and we're going to zoom in, and we're going to scroll over, and we're going to move this track down so that we're approximately 3 squares from the bottom. And now that we've got that placed, we're going to go over to the layers. And on the right side, there's a box with a plus, a minus, a pencil, arrows, and then it says standard bedien. Standard Ebene, which is German for standard layer. We're going to click on that, and then we're going to go ahead. Now, if for some reason the layers doesn't show up like that, you can go and click on View, go down and make sure Layers is checked. That'll bring it up. Now we'll go ahead and click on that. We'll click on the pencil, and that allows us to edit the name and a few other things. So we'll change that to Standard Layer. And then right below the name, there's a box with 3 dots. We'll click on the dots, and we'll go ahead and we'll pick a color. And we're going to pick red, a nice red color. And when we do that, you'll note that the technical grid changes to red, as well as the track. We're going to click on plus now, and we're going to add a few more layers. We'll call this one tracks. And we'll click and we'll choose a color green. And click OK on that. So we've added another layer. We'll add one more layer. We'll call this one tunnels. And we'll pick the color on that one, and we'll go with a blue, a dark blue. Layers can be used to set up different parts of the layout. We're going to go ahead and click on track, and when you double click on it, you get a small arrow indicating that's the active layer. Now, since that piece of track is in the standard layer instead of the tracks, we can go over to the little red box under properties and click on that, and it'll give us a drop down. We'll go down and click on tracks, and the track turned green, indicating it's in the track layer. And then we'll go ahead and we'll take a break while I lay the rest of the track for this layout. Okay, we've got the rest of the track all laid out. You'll note that there's several pieces in here that have different colors in them. There's a couple of dark red and red, blue and green. And then on the double track over toward the other side, there's another set of tracks that are colored green and blue. Now, these ones that are the green and blue are going to be used for a tunnel. The others are for special events in the event management. And so we'll go ahead and we'll start building a tunnel now. And you click on the plugins, go down to planning and tunnel laying or tunnel setting, and we're ready to go. Now this program has a help file that tells you how to use it. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to close that. The first thing we want is to get near the blue-green sections. And we're going to go to Scenery, to Tunnels, and Tunnels CH. And we'll go ahead and we'll scroll all the way over almost to the very end of the list. And there's a little tunnel piece here near the end that we'll use, and we'll drag that up onto the board. And we'll just kind of drop that there. And we're going to select that piece, or we're going to try to, and it gave us an error that it doesn't have a setting locomotive. So we'll go back and we'll go to the locomotives. And the locomotive we're looking for is a special locomotive. It's called SX1. It's green and red. And we'll drag that up onto the board. We'll set that on one of the tracks, the left one, and then we'll put another one on the right track. And since it wants specific names, we'll go ahead and scroll in and we'll take a look at that and go over. Now the green portion of the locomotive shows the direction of setting. We'll go ahead and click on that and we'll move that so that the green red line is lined up with the green blue line. And we'll do the same thing with the other one. And the one in the right track, we actually want to call that SX1A. So we'll go down to where it shows the name under Properties. And we'll change that and add an A on there. And now we can go ahead and select the tunnel piece. We actually need to click on the tunnel piece first and then click on it. And now it's selected the tunnel piece. Now what we need to do is we'll click, make sure we've got it set correctly, recognizing the setting locomotive. The other one's grayed out because it's currently set for one track. So we'll go ahead and we'll set the segment, and that sets it right center on the track, directly underneath the SX1 locomotive. And we'll go ahead and we'll go up to the top now. And on the right side, the first thing is the overlap, and that can be anywhere from 0.2 to 10. We'll leave that at 10. We'll go down right below that. We'll take the single track and take the check mark off, set it for double track. And then it's got an option below that to see if SX1 is on the left track, which it is. And then we need to measure the distance between the tracks. We can do that by clicking SX1 and SX1A. That will measure the track for us. and then we can measure it. Now we want the distance between the track to be the Y dimension, which is the front to back as shown on the screen with the little arrow. The width of the tunnel is from one side to the other. That's the X. We'll click Set Segment again. That will put it right in the middle between the two tracks, parallel with the tracks. Then we'll rotate it 90 degrees. And we'll need to go ahead now and rotate the view a little bit. And you can see that the tunnel covers the tracks. And that's because it's a little too high. We'll go ahead and click on that. And then we'll go over to the 3D icon. We'll change the height of that to 0. Actually 0.25. And that's low enough so that you can see some of the track and the rails. And then we need to go ahead and link the tunnel to the setting locomotive. And now we can go ahead and we can rotate that back and zoom out and move over until we can see the green-blue segment at one end. Scroll over and zoom out until we can get to the other side so we can see that one as well. And we'll just keep zooming out and moving over. Almost there. Okay, now we can see the end section where the green and blue are. We click Start Setting. And then in a moment we'll be clicking on Automatic Setting. And when we reach the end of where we want the tunnel to end, we'll go over to the gray box that says Stop Setting. And we'll click on that right there. Down below the boxes, it shows the speed of the setting. That can be anything you want. And we're checking to make sure that everything is recognized by the program. And then we'll click Automatic Setting. And there goes the tunnel. Move the pointer over and get ready to click Stop when we reach the beginning of the blue section on the other end. And we're there now, so we'll click Stop. Now, since we've got the tunnel all in place, we can get rid of the plug-in and click the X for that. We're going to go and zoom in on this. And you'll note that the tunnel ended up being just a little bit too far. So we'll click on the segment, which is the piece that was actually used to set the tunnel, and we'll get rid of that. And there's another one underneath it that's part of the tunnel, and then one more. And it's lined up enough, so we're good for that. We'll click on the setting locomotive, which we no longer need, and we'll delete that. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to scroll over to the other end and rotate the view a little bit. We'll rotate that. And we can see the other locomotive. We'll go ahead and we'll click on that. And we'll delete that. And the tunnel setting program can also be used to lay bridge segments. Now we're going to go over to where we've got these two tracks that join, and we're going to build a track spiral. And this is done with another plugin called Track Positioning Tools. And we'll bring that up. And we want the third option, Track Spiral. And this also has a help file. Now what this wants is a small curved piece. We'll go ahead and we'll move that over to the edge here. And we'll go ahead and we'll go to Tracks, to the same type of track, Payco. We'll pick up a code 100 curve. Drag that up and put it on the board. Now, since this lays pieces using mathematical approximation, it's best to use pieces of track that are extremely small. So we'll go ahead and we'll edit that curved track, and we're going to change the angle on that from 45 down to 2 degrees. And then we'll go ahead and we'll change the radius to, I believe, about 500. And we'll go ahead and click on that. Now it wants the name for this track to be called SG, so we'll change the name under name to SG. And then we'll go ahead and we'll move this SG track and unfortunately we had modification on, so we need to go back to the three-dimensional tool and we'll zero out the X and Y rotations. And the Z height to 0. And then we need to go ahead and move that over. We'll rotate that so that it curves the direction we want. And we left the track modification on, so we'll go back to there and change that to none. Then we'll go back to the 3D tool. We'll zero out the rotations again and the height again to 0. And then we'll go ahead and we'll move that piece up and put it on the end of where we're going to build our spiral. So we'll go ahead now and we'll kind of get the thing positioned right. And we're going to bring up the control panel for the spiral. The first thing we need to do is to click on where it says radius after we move it over. And clicking on the radius basic track and the angle basic track, that will read the value of the SG. Which is right there, so we'll go ahead and we didn't have it selected. We need to click on it and select it. Got the wrong piece. So we'll go ahead and we'll move in a little bit. Scroll over. Select SG. Now we'll go over and we'll click on the track. Those are marked with an asterisk. And when we click, it reads the radius and the degree. Then we enter the number of loops, and we want 5 loops. And it tells us the number of pieces that we're going to use and the elevation, the slope. Now I found it's best to use a relatively low number. We're going to go with 7.5, which is nearly 3 inches for a loop. We want to go clockwise and up. We don't want any sections added to the beginning or the end that are flat, so we'll take the check mark off that. And we'll go ahead, make sure we've got that centered, and then click Start, and it will proceed to lay track. And that should start as soon as we click Start. Now you'll note that it's actually taking it clockwise like we said, but it's a little bit of a slow program. Part of the track is hidden and you'll see it showing up in a few spots. We're coming up now on the beginning of the second loop. So we'll go ahead and we'll just let that run until it finally completes itself. Now when it finishes all the spirals that we told it to lay, all the loops we told it to lay, it's going to group the whole spiral into one group, and that makes it easier to move that spiral around if we need to. We should note that SG is not actually part of the spiral, it's just a template. And so when we get the spiral finished, we'll move that a little bit and we'll get rid of the SG track. Now it's beginning the third loop around. Now it looks like it's just kind of flat and not a perfect circle, but that's because we're at an angle. So now we're beginning the fourth loop. This does have a tendency to be just a little bit jerky in how the program works, and that's because it's making changes and kind of loading up the program a bit. So now we're done there, and we can go ahead and get rid of the control panel for the track spiral. Sometimes it takes a minute to respond. Now we're going to go ahead and we'll rotate the spiral a little bit. And we can zoom in now, down here where the arrow is. And we actually want to move that spiral just a little bit. You'll note that it's buried below the base plate because it's lined up incorrectly at the base. So we'll move that up a bit. And we have a little bit of a gap now, so we can zoom in there and take SG1 and remove it by deleting it. Then we'll go ahead and we'll click on the spiral again, and we'll go ahead and we'll move that so that it joins the end of the track. Now I didn't really like the placement of the spiral like that. So I went ahead and I moved the spiral a little bit. You won't actually see that. We got that adjusted. We're going to put a couple of curve sections on at the end of this little Y thing that we're looking at right now. And then we'll put the spiral on. So now we're going to go ahead and take a break, pause the video, go get yourself something to drink and refreshments. And now we're back and we're going to go ahead and we've put a quarter circle at the end of the Y and then join the spiral on. There is a locomotive sitting on top of that spiral. We tested the spiral to make sure it cleared properly. And now we're going to start landscaping. And to do that, you click on the mountain symbol under Properties, and that will give you the grid view for adjusting the terrain, the height of the terrain. We're going to adjust the size of the brush. We want a really nice big brush on this one. So we'll go ahead and we'll go up to a nice big number. And then we're going to change the gradient. We want to go to a very high gradient, close to 100. Because we want kind of a gentle slope on this mountain. And then we click on height mode, and that shows the grid. And the grid is really small, but you see it's kind of a grayish. And as we zoom in a little bit, you'll be able to see those numbers individually, or those points individually. It looks like the coverage is a little bit too small, so we're going to go over to the brush size again, and we'll change the brush size and make it larger. We'll go up to about 1,000 to 1,200. because we want a circle that's nearly the same size, if not a touch larger, than the track spiral. That's a little closer. Make that a little bit larger still. And then we'll go ahead and we'll go back and click again. It should be a little bit larger. That's pretty close, but we want to have the track completely in the red. So we adjust that a little bit, move around. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to hold down the Shift key, and we're going to hold down the left mouse button at the same time and drag the pointer up, which will raise the ground in the green, red, yellow area. A little hard to see right now, but it is raising up a little bit. We'll take the Shift off. We'll go ahead, or actually we release the mouse button, move the pointer down, click again, the whole time holding the Shift, and we'll drag up again, and you can see that the track is beginning to disappear and the mountain is beginning to be visible. So we'll just keep doing that with releasing the mouse button, keeping the Shift down, and then clicking again and dragging up again. And we'll do that until we get the track completely covered. And the track is nearly gone. We'll just keep dragging up, and a little bit more disappears. And when we get the thing pretty much completely covered, then we can go ahead and take the height mode off. And you'll be able to see the mountain a little bit better when the color goes. And we'll go ahead and we'll rotate that view a little bit. Zoom out and rotate. And there's the mountain. Looks kind of like a volcano, only it's a little tall. But this isn't real life. This is just computer simulation, so that's okay. And we actually zoomed in too far, and now we're looking at the inside. What we're trying to do is get to the peak, because we're going to take the peak and we're going to make it indented. So we'll go ahead there, click on the peak now. We'll go to the mountain view again, to the mountain mode. We'll shrink the brush down to a very small brush. And we're still a little bit too large at 220, so we'll go down a little more. Put the height mode on. Click at the top. And this time we're going to click and we're going to drag down. And that puts a dent or a cone in the top of the mountain. Take the height mode off. Now when you're building something with mountains or hills or raising the landscape, it's a good idea not to overlap plates. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to rotate that view a little bit. We're going to move over to where the tunnel is. This may take a minute. And we're going to actually go ahead and export the height map for that piece, the L form. So we go ahead and export, save it as a grayscale bitmap, call it L form. And then we'll go ahead and save that. Then we're going to exit the train program in a moment. This is taking a little longer than I expected. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to a program called paint.net. And that's a free program and it can be downloaded at the website paint.net. We're going to pull that paint program up. And it's telling us there's an upgrade. We'll skip that for now. And we're going to go ahead and open the grayscale bitmap that we just created for the L form. Scroll down and find it. It'll come up in a second. Now the lighter the color, the higher the elevation. We're going to go now to Effects to Crystallize. And we're going to set the size on that very small to like 2. And we're going to raise the quality on that as high as we can, which is going to be like 4 or 5. We'll reseed. And then we'll go ahead and we'll click OK. And that kind of distorts the view in that a little bit, kind of makes it a little crystallized. And zoom in so you can see that. And then we'll go ahead and we'll scroll up to where that cone mountain is. And it's a little hard to see in that view, but that looks kind of like diamonds in there. We'll save that. And then we're going to go ahead and close the paint program. And it will automatically update itself when we do. And we'll just minimize that. And we'll go back to the paint program. And we're going to import that height map we just saved and modified. And it's telling us that it's updating. We'll go ahead and we'll select the bitmap that we just modified. Scroll down and find that. Now it's loaded and it gives us the origin points. We leave that as is, and the height from 0 to, well, we'll set that at what was close to what it was before. And when we do that, it's going to change the mountain. It lowered it down just a hair, and then it kind of roughed up the edges, as you can see. This will come in handy when we landscape. So now we've got the cone mountain finished, and we'll go ahead and we'll go down on the board to the tunnel. Zoom out a little, scroll down. Okay, we changed the view to the technical view. The red is the standard layer. The blue I changed to the tunnel layer where the tunnel is, and I actually did that so we could see the boundary edges. Now we can go ahead and go back to our 3D view. We need to adjust the position of the plates. One of them got raised a little too high. You can see parts of it have disappeared. So we'll adjust that, the L form, and lower it down to 0. And the track should all come back when we do, which it did. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to go down to where the tunnel is. Actually, we're looking at the other mountain. We tried to adjust the landscape right here, which usually is going to put in a nice little notch at the beginning of the for a tunnel piece. But this one, it actually took out a nice big chunk of the mountain and it exposed the track. So we'll go ahead and we'll undo that one. And we'll just put a piece in later right against the edge of it. So let's go ahead and go down to where the tunnel is. This does take a bit of time, unfortunately, so just bear with me. We're going to be working on the bottom plate this time instead of the L form. And we've gone ahead and we've activated the grid for that. Put in a kind of a small brush, a high degree of gradient. And we kind of drug that out. You can see that the red on the edges, and then yellow in toward the center, and then green. And for some reason the recording isn't catching up with us. We may have to wait on that for a bit. Okay, now we've gone all the way to the other end. And we've got a little bit of blue showing on both ends. So we'll go ahead now and hold down the Shift key and the click and raise it up a little bit. And you can see the tunnel is beginning to disappear. And we'll go ahead and we'll reduce the size of the brush and the gradient. We'll highlight again where we already raised the ground a bit. Get all the way over to the other side of the tunnel. And we'll raise that one more time, a little bit more. And the ends are still visible, but the center is all buried. We'll change the brush size again and the gradient to a smaller one. We'll drag that across the third time. Sometimes if you move a little faster, you get spots where it didn't completely cover, but that's actually okay. We'll go ahead and we'll try to move that again. Now it's lagging a little bit because I've got a grid size of 1 centimeter and we've got a very large plate, and so it's a little slow to do all that. And if you don't mind it being slow when you're working on your pieces, you can do that, or you can reduce the grid size or actually increase the grid size to like 2 or 3 centimeters. And you get better detail at 1, but it's faster at 2 or 3 or even higher. So we'll go ahead and we'll just keep dragging that and raise that up. Take the height mode off. So now we've got the tunnel all built, or the mountains around the tunnel built. It looks like we might be going to add another section on top of that. It's hard to say, I can't remember. But we'll go ahead and we'll take the height mode off when we get that all finished. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to export that height map just like we did the other one. And again, the computer's running slow, so we exported that. We brought that into the paint program. And then we went into the effects to distort and crystallize, just like we did the other one. And we'll set the settings like we did before with a small size and a high quality and reseed and then save that. We'll import that back in. We'll set the height at an appropriate height, which I believe was probably somewhere around 500 or so. We'll go ahead and click on that. And that will retexture the mountain. Make some adjustments to the surface of the mountain. And we've got that done now. Now we want to go ahead and take on the ends where the track is and adjust the terrain where the little blue pieces are. So we've gone ahead and done the one. We'll catch the other one and then we'll go ahead and we'll rotate the view around to the other side. And we'll adjust the other side as well so that you can see the opening for the tunnel. The reason why we do this is so we've got a nice clean entrance for the tunnel ends when the train goes in. So it should show the other end in a minute. The video kind of gets blocky and doesn't show everything as it's moving. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start landscaping, putting down some texture colors. And we went ahead and we went into the paint program, and I've already loaded up some textures. We're going to start with the ice at the top, and we'll make a small brush, about 60 or so, and we'll drop the gradient down to somewhere around 45 or 40, and leave the opacity at 100 and paint. And we're going to start painting the ice now up on the top. And I like to start at the top and work my way down, so we're painting ice on the top of the mountain. And we'll just work our way across. And now don't worry if it spills too far down the mountain, or if we end up with getting some on the base plate. We'll go ahead and we'll take and finish this up, but I won't bother showing you at this point. We'll just go ahead and go part way on this. So we've painted the top a little bit and scroll over. Put a little bit more ice in here. And then we'll go ahead, put a little bit more ice in along the top of that. And I'm going to take the paint mode off and move it over a little bit. Rotate the view so we can see the top. We've finished the ice now, so we're going to put the paint back on. We're going to select another texture. This time we're going to be taking one that is kind of a gray rock, and we'll start painting that right below the ice and actually cover a bit of the ice. So we've got the second layer down. We're putting that in. Now there's the second layer done. And we're going to adjust the size of the different textures. Start with the ice. And then we'll go ahead and we'll go to the second one, to the rock layer. We're going to actually do a third layer. Looks like we start about halfway down where the slope increases. Start painting the third layer in. And we'll just work our way across with that one as well. We want to come down to almost the bottom where the slope is greatest. So we'll work our way across there. And we'll go over and we'll finish that. Now we've finished the third layer. We're going to a fourth layer now, and we're going to start painting the fourth layer in. We've done a little bit of painting there, and we'll go ahead and continue painting the bottom layer. You can see I spilled a little bit of ice on the base plate. We'll cover that up later. But we'll just go ahead and we'll put some more of that bottom layer in. Do a little bit of rotation and adjustment so we can see better. And we'll paint that in. And we'll just keep painting on that until we get it all covered. And we won't necessarily show all of the paint portion, but you can see what we're doing with that, making sure all the wood is covered. And then we'll go ahead and we're nearly done with the bottom layer. So now we've got that all painted. We're looking at it from one end. And we'll adjust the view a little bit. And then we're going to go over and we're going to paint the volcano layer, the mountain layer, in a couple of seconds. So now we're looking at the mountain layer. I'm putting in a brown texture. We've got that covered. We'll rotate the view on this a few times so we can get the entire mountain covered. Then after we get the base layer on, then we're going to go ahead and we'll pick a second layer to put on the mountain. We're still working on the base paint. We got that done now. We'll go ahead now and we will add an ash layer. We want the transparency on this to be fairly low. That's a little bit too high. It obscures the base paint. So we'll undo that and pick another, lower the transparency down a good bit more. That should disappear in a second or so. And then we'll go ahead and we'll put the ash layer back in. We moved the base plate, so let's fix that. And then we'll go ahead and we'll put the transparency very low. And we'll start painting the second layer on there. And there's part of it, and you can see that the base layer still shows through. So we'll finish that one up. And once we finish that one, we'll kind of zoom out. And there's the final view of the whole thing. This concludes the third episode. Join us again next time when we'll put some more stuff onto the board and finish it up.